Hello, welcome back. So, Sean, this is another Chat with Sean episode. And yeah, busy as usual. So, I'll get the housekeeping out of the way and kind of then get on to our great guest today. So much going, as I say. And what's really great about the channel, I know I bang on about this till the cows come home, but we have such a range of chats about a whole range of subjects. So, going through the last few, we've had Azim Ahmad from Reflect Digital, the agency, talking about the new Search Pulse report, talking about user behaviors online at the moment and that kind of thing. We had Ben Steele on, who was obviously the former managing editor of Search Engine Journal. And he was talking about why SEO content's boring now and what we can do to spice things up. We had James Condon on, which we're talking about the job market at the moment, how the AI is affecting the job market and careers and recruitment, maybe something we'll touch on today. And finally, we had Miriam Jessia and Julia Panozzo on, and I was talking about the psychology behind search and biases and AI behaviors and stuff. So as you can see, such a wide range of topics that we cover on this channel, which is awesome. And we get on to today's great guest. And again, it's something different and really been looking forward to this for a while, to be honest. And so obviously, today we've got the great Ursula Capell on today. And Ursula is a leadership and life coach and founder of Co-Creative Future, a coaching consultancy for people who know something needs to change but aren't sure where to start. She helps emerging leaders, creatives in transition and forward-thinking organizations to ditch the old rules and build something that actually works for humans and not just for KPIs. So, thank you, Ursula, for joining me today.
Oh, thanks, Sean. It's great to be here. I'm really excited for our conversation. And wow, what a range of guests you've had on as well.
Yeah, it really opened my mind. I just talk about so many different subjects. It's cool. And search encompasses so many different things like psychology and like behaviors and intent and stuff. And obviously, today we're going to mainly talk about careers and how to manage your career and, progression and stuff. And when we first had our initial chat, it just really was fascinating in what you do. And I think it's important more than ever to have this conversation because of the environment that we live in these days, across the world, especially in the UK, where the economy is tricky to say the least. And, jobs are being cut, or if they're not being cut, then you feel like you're potentially under pressure from either financially or AI, so it's going to be interesting. We'll just kind of get into it because we've got a few topics that we kind of discussed prior. Burnout and autopilot careers, why are they so common at this stage, and how do you spot the early signs? I think, a lot of people have reached burnout, especially in digital marketing. Any thoughts in this area?
What's really interesting in the world of work right now is we've got this kind of legacy of the Industrial Revolution, where we're all kind of, we need to make everything more efficient and more machine-like. And we've kind of lost the humanness that goes with it. And because we're always trying to do more with less, I mean, we all know that over the years, job cuts, and we're trying to do more, the expectations are higher with fewer people. People are just not having the space to actually look at themselves and think about their whole lives. They're just so busy keeping their heads above water. And then, at some point you just realize you're absolutely exhausted. Now, I mean, exhaustion is different to burnout, because I think burnout is much more about when you realize that your values and who you are not in alignment with what you're doing. And it creates this conflict. And I know that myself, because I was definitely in that place where I had this awful feeling inside me about not being able to, not having the energy or the oomph to get up and get on with my job in the same way as I used to, because I didn't love it. It didn't excite me anymore. And then I was thinking it was me and it was my problem. And to some extent that's true, but it's also a systemic thing. Athletes, who are training, they're not running at peak all the time. They're having peak and rest and peak and rest. They can't be at optimum level of performance all the time, but we don't seem to look at that in business. We expect people to be busy, optimized all the time, all day, every day. And then, of course, you add in the fact that you can't put it down because it follows you. It's on your phone. It's in your notifications, and you can't switch off. And then there becomes this pressure to be on all the time, and that interferes with all of the other aspects of your life as well. So I think all those things together mean that people are struggling because the world of work is so demanding. And if you're not enjoying what you're doing, or you don't feel like it fits with who you are anymore, then you end up with a really bad case of feeling disillusioned, or even burnt out, or just plain stressed out and exhausted.
Yeah, actually you brought up a good point, because no, I'm not saying it was any better back in these days by any means, but obviously back in the old, days, like the 50s and whatnot, people would go to the mines, or they would go to the factory, and they'll do their work. They'll get back at 5 o'clock and switch off, and they would all go down the pub and relax. There'd be no social media. There'd be no 24-hour news. It's just like there was a real disconnect between work and then life, family life, social life, where now, like you say, because of social media, because of prompts coming on your phone from Teams or Slack or whatever, it kind of merged together because of technology. There's no real escape. You reckon that's a kind of maybe one of the main reasons for burnout in a way, because you just don't, people are incapable, a lot of people probably incapable of switching that off.
Yeah, and it's very interesting, the whole conversation around remote working. I do a lot of work with an organization called the Work Style Revolution. It's about transforming the world of work to being much more autonomous and working when you want and how you want. But we are rather bound by expectation and that legacy of that, 9 to 5, or even 9 to 9, depending on what industry you're in, which is now moving into that being very reactive and getting back to people really quickly. And I think, the whole conversation around working from home and remote work, people sort of go, oh, they're all slacking off and they're kind of, binging from the fridge every 5 minutes. So I think my experience of that is completely the opposite, actually. People are much more productive and people are much more hardworking at home. If they're not, and they're one of those people that moves their mouse every 5 minutes, then your organization's measuring the wrong stuff. Because what outputs are you producing if that's all you're doing whilst playing a game on your phone or something, right? So the outputs are all screwed, and that's what you need to be looking at as an organization. But most of the people who are working remotely, I feel like they work more, and because their work is at home, there is that blurred boundary as well. And you end up giving more, I think, quite often to your organization when you're working from home. You get other things in return, because you get the ability to be able to put the washing on, over the lunch break or whatever. But I do feel like people are more productive because you need to demonstrate the outputs that you're giving. And think some of the things that are more invisible, like, leadership can be quite invisible sometimes. If you spend 3 hours having one-to-ones with your team to check in on how they are, what's the output? What's there to show for that? In the short term, there isn't, but in the long term, hopefully it means better well-being, that people stay in their jobs longer if you invest in your team. But so that there is an issue with the balance of outputs and long-term advantage or long-term impact of what you're doing. It's a really complex area, but I feel like when you're at home, the boundaries are harder. You have to be more proactively boundaried. And sometimes the workplace isn't ready for that, because people go, oh, they're just being difficult or they're being awkward. Or actually what they're being is more boundaried, and being really clear about that. I'm available to do this and I can do that. But if I can't do that, these are my boundaries around it, and this is when I can do it instead. And that's all really healthy, but we haven't quite sort of flicked into that way of working yet in many places. I am seeing it in some forward-thinking organizations, but in many places not, because we have that sort of parent-child relationship between employee and employer, where the employer feels like they need to parent, the child, the employee. And actually, if we can move it to being a more adult-to-adult type of relationship, where the organization sees the ability of an employee to be an adult, to be self-determining, to be able to be autonomous, and to get what they need to done in a way that suits them, and not have to micromanage them, then we are going to be into more healthy, more human kinds of relationships. But that involves work for both the individual to take the responsibility and accountability for that, and the organization to enable that through leadership for that to happen.
Yeah, 100%. I say that all the time. Like, I just don't understand as a company why you would hire someone and then like do that kind of surveillance kind of on them and not make them feel like they can be trusted, unless they give you a real reason to be. But obviously, if they do that, then you shouldn't have them at your company. So I just feel like there's a thing with tech. I feel like I'm bashing tech. Obviously, I'm not, because I work in it and I love it. But it has obviously enabled surveillance to go to a whole new level, and that's obviously going to happen with AI a lot more. And I just feel like, yeah, I could stare at an Excel sheet for hours and do like nothing, or literally nothing, like no progressive like outcome to it. Or I could go for a walk and actually come up with some really great creative ideas that would move the needle. So like, yeah, do you want me sitting on my computer, like you say, like moving my mouse around? Or do you want me actually coming up with some groundbreaking ideas, And that's kind of what, like you say, that's kind of the difference. Yeah.
That's so true. And actually, the impact and the value you add by going for that walk. And there's, research now that says going for a walk makes you more creative. You're going to generate more creative ideas. So, if we can measure the right things and measure people's value that they're adding, rather than whether you choose to do it through a walk or whether you choose to sit at your computer staring at your spreadsheet, because that might work for some people, actually, then you create a level playing field, and you create the freedom for people to be able to work in the way they want to, because actually what you're measuring is their value and what their contribution is, in a different way to, have you spent 8 hours at your desk and did you log in and log out at the right time? Yeah. Which is, the legacy of 150 years ago, where people clocked in and clocked out in a factory.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess obviously, like the premise of the question was, around burnout and autopilot. Like, if you're on autopilot or you're burning out, like how do you know, do you reckon, about how do you spot those signs that potentially that's happening to you, or you're kind of going through it?
Well, I think often the problem is you don't realize until after the event. And so, something happens that makes you ill, or, in some way. And but it's quite hard. It's almost quite hard to spot it when it's actually happening. I feel like I've been through that, but it's only looking back in hindsight that I can see that's what it was. You just feel like, you can't cope. There's overwhelm. You're stressed out all the time. Obviously, you're not sleeping properly. Your relationships get affected. Your ability to do the work is affected. You're not being as effective and efficient as you you can be, right? And there's just feels like this big disconnect, and probably a big dose of can't be askedness as well falls in, because actually you're just not you at that moment in time. And it doesn't kind of switch on overnight and then switch off the next day. It's something that builds up. And, I think unless you have the ability to be able to spot it in yourself, which I think is very hard, sometimes it's something knocks you over, either an illness or a disciplinary or something that makes you realize that you need to seek help. But I think when you've been through it once or twice, you can start to notice it in yourself more often. But I think that's the problem, is that we keep going, we don't realize, because it's a gradual thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I'm quite good at kind of ignoring some of the signs, and I know when my body starts, like, my body tells me all the time when I start to get onto the brink of burnout or something. I really do see the signs. I'm like, okay, yeah, got to relax a bit now,
because you've been there, done that, and now you realize, actually, I can spot the signs now, they're coming. Yeah.
And it's just crazy, isn't it? Like, without getting too philosophical, but like, humans, we've done this to ourselves. Like, we've created this sort of, world that we live in, that we feel like we have to do this working patterns and pressure and all this anxiety and that. Like, it actually doesn't need to be like this. I just feel it's like a strange thing that we've created. But There you go. Um,
I would agree with you. And money has a big dealing in all of that. In part of the field that I studied in most recently, positive psychology, there is a new area in this field called positive economic psychology, and it's just looking at things like the universal basic income and how we can almost take money out of the equation. And I know that produces a lot of different feelings in a lot of different people. But, what if everyone had the basic things to be able to keep a roof over their head, clothe themselves, and feed themselves and their family? What would that mean? So actually, in research where they've done it in small areas, they can see people start to step into volunteering or doing stuff that has more purpose and meaning for themselves, rather than spending all their time on just providing themselves with the basics. Could all go back to living in caves.
It might be better at this stage. Do you think, obviously, with AI, that, all these talk, I mean, you can take it a pinch of salt, I guess, but people are saying by 2030 that 98% of jobs are going to be taken by AI and this kind of thing. Amazon looking to get rid of all of their staff and replace with AI by in the next few years. Do you think that's actually realistic, that kind of universal wage could happen? Obviously, Sam Altman has bounced that around a bit, but it might be quite difficult to implement.
Yeah, I mean, with the current way of the world and the current leadership in the world, I think we're a long way off. But I'm a hopeless optimist on that front, and not in my lifetime, but maybe in our children or grandchildren's lifetime, we might see some changes. AI might well force that, because if you've got, as they predict, 98% of people without a job, how the hell are people going to feed themselves and keep the roof over their head? Something in terms of economy and how we build an economy has got to change. And I'm absolutely no expert in that area at all, or in AI. But I do feel that being human, being authentic, being the creative humans that we're meant to be, rather than trying to be machine, like machinery, like the world of work is often asking of us at the moment, has definitely got to have a place in all of that. Because, well, unless the machines, eradicate us and the world, survives because humans are not destroying it anymore. But anyway, that's big philosophy and another conversation, I think.
Yeah, I love it. No, it's just it's fascinating, and it just seems straight like back in the day. Again, life wasn't easy. I'm sure of that. There's a lot of problems still then, but it was like you say, without money, it was just people doing things that they enjoy, and they were trading and swapping each other's, whatever. If you're farming, and if you were, had cattle or something, or you're doing woodwork, and they would trade each other for things they needed. It seemed like a lot more peaceful sort of process.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, I've just finished reading the second time around one of my favorite books, which is Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth, which is basically about a master mason building a massive cathedral. So I recommend it if you love a kind of big epic saga. And, the life there is very, very hard. If you're somebody that's trying to find work and you haven't got work, then life is very, very hard. But I think the sort of thing you're talking to is that idea of simplicity and going back to basics, and the fact that we seem to have overcomplicated everything in our world. And actually, if we went back to some of the simple things in life, like community, like friendship, like sharing, like helping each other, and slowing down, actually, that might be a really useful thing for the world. And something I'm personally very drawn to. I work part of the year from Spain, where we're building a house in Andalusia. And that's what I really love about there is the, being in contact with nature, and it being very quiet and still and peaceful, and noticing where the moon is at night, and seeing the stars, and seeing the sun come up and go down. And the fact that that real sense of it takes a village to raise a child. They still have that real sense of everybody looks out for everybody else, and everyone looks out for the children. And I feel like that's something we've definitely lost in the UK. So I kind of feel what you're feeling there, Sean, is that kind of yearning for simplicity.
Yeah, I just see that in a lot of organizations as well. And generally in the industry and digital marketing, I think so many things like, not purposely, I guess, maybe purposely in some occasions, but just overcomplicated for like no apparent reason and just made chaotic. And so too many chefs in the kitchen, all that kind of thing. It's just like, yeah, if you did all what you just said, I think things would be actually progress a lot more and a lot quicker, and probably get better results, but who knows? But in terms of, we'll move on to the next topic. So in terms of like, what tools or frameworks could help people move from confusion to clarity?
Yeah, so here you're talking about when people feel like there's something wrong and they don't quite know what to do next. How do they kind of move forward, and how do they get that clarity? And I think one of the key things there is there isn't a switch that flicks into confusion into clarity. It's a kind of gentle process, and often it's in the doing, it's in the trying stuff out that the clarity comes. And so I think, one of the things I do with people is to do exactly the stuff we've been talking about, which is to slow down and tune in to what's going on. So it's like, get rid of the background noise, get rid of the white noise around you, the phone, the TV in the background, the music or whatever, and just be with silence and be with the feelings of what's coming up. And it's interesting, I notice in myself the times when I most need to do that are the sort of times when I'm reluctant. When I feel if I'm eating my lunch and I can't just focus on the food and I need to kind of, I don't know, do my Duolingo lesson on the phone, I suddenly realize, well, actually, that is a call to me to just slow down and just notice the food and be present with the food and notice the taste, etc. And we all do we layer so many things on top of each other in terms of our experience. We can't actually get to the thing that we need to think about. And actually, it's more than thinking about it, it's the feeling it. It's like, not until we make that space, we can start to feel into it. Our mind and our thinking can be so over dominant sometimes that we're kind of cut off here, and we're thinking these things, but we're not feeling it. And we know the logic works, but we're not feeling it. So actually, when we start to listen to what's going on in our heart and our gut, then we can start to really get the wisdom of what we actually want and what actually might really matter. Thinking about, while I start to notice that doing this gives me energy, like going for that walk really gives me the energy and it gives me the creative ideas. Small things. What I notice is when I play with my kid, it really brings me alive. When we do painting together, whatever it is. And it's those things that start to notice, that start to give you clues about what's really important to you and what really matters. And the other thing as well, I think, is to let go of ego and identity and work. A lot of us set our identity. I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm the other. And it's, the job title and the job progression becomes really important. And I've been there too. Many years ago, success meant to me was to get a, fancy job title, head of creative services or, senior business director or whatever. And I don't really care about job titles anymore. Actually, what success means for me now is doing great work with great and interesting people that has a positive impact. That's it. So I can do that in many different ways. And when we take our identity away and we think about what really makes my heart sing and what really matters to me, and what is the kind of purpose or meaning or thing that I want to bring to the world. And it's sort of making space for thinking about all of that. And when you get a sense of all of that, it doesn't have to be anything grand. Most of us don't wake up or grow into a 3-year-old and pick up a violin and suddenly discover our purpose was to be a concert violinist. That doesn't happen for most of us. Most of us have this sense of wanting to have a contribution and then deciding, well, how do I use my talents? How do I use my strengths? And how do I use the things that bring me joy in order to contribute to that area? So it's a much more kind of general, low level, less kind of like, I'm going to, fly to the moon type of, purpose. And that's okay. But as soon as we understand what our strengths are, things, we can be really good at stuff we don't like doing. I mean, I'm really good at project management, but I don't really like doing it anymore. And my whole, a lot of my career was I was in project management, and actually I really don't like doing it anymore. And realizing that, even though I'm good at it, is actually quite interesting because it was dragging me down. So actually, how do I bring those other skills, the skills in communicating with people, the skills in managing people's expectations, I really enjoy, because it's about taking people on a journey with you, but I don't want to do the delivery end of it. I realize that. And so sometimes it's also about realizing not just your strengths, but then what it is you also like doing, and new strengths you might want to create. So when I work with people, I build a map of all that sort of stuff. What's important to you? What are your values? What are your strengths? What brings you joy? And this takes a while to kind of filter through. What is the contribution that you want to make in the world, or to your family, or to yourself? And then we can start to look at, okay, in what way do you want to do that? And I'm a bit older than you, Sean, but there was a children's animation on the telly when I was little called Mr. Ben. And Mr. Ben, he's on the front of the flower. He used to be on the front of the flower. He had a little bowler hat and a black suit, and he would go into a changing room in a shop. And he would choose an outfit. Like one time he'd be a caveman, or he'd be an American native Indian, or he'd be a, opera singer or something like that. And he'd put the outfit on and he'd go through the curtain and he would live out that for the day. And that's sort of what I invite people to do: explore the different ideas, play with the different possibilities, try the different hats on, and see what feels. Get into the feeling of what's bringing you the joy, what brings you excitement. And then from there, you can, a bit like the sliding doors moment, I could go this route, or I could go that route, or I could go another route. What are you feeling brings you joy? And then take a step in that direction. It's not suddenly you have to shut down your whole life and reinvent yourself. Just what's the next step to kind of explore that a bit more, and the next step. And then what you find is, over time, you look back and realize that clarity is a journey that you've been on to get to more clarity over time, through thinking about these things in different ways. And I think the last part in answer to that question is, we carry a lot of unhelpful stories and a lot of unhelpful beliefs around with us. Something about beliefs, we think that beliefs are kind of fixed and they're the truth, they're factual. They're not, they're beliefs. You believe that, the world is a good place, or you believe the world is a bad place. Neither of those are particularly right or wrong. They're just what's helpful to you. And actually, if it's not helpful to you to believe that thing, what is a new belief that you could create instead? So it's, I believe I'm only worth something if I have this important job. That is a belief. It's not necessarily true. There are plenty of people who don't have important jobs, who really have a really good sense of their own identity and their own worth and their own value. It's all according to what your beliefs are about different things. So what are those unhelpful stories we're telling about? What's holding us back? What are the beliefs we've picked up from everybody else? What are those little voices inside our head? That's another topic. We all have these voices inside our heads, and some of them are really helpful. They go, come on, Sean, you can do this. And the other ones might go, what are you doing this for, Sean? You don't want to make an idiot of yourself, right? We all have those sorts of things. We have that inner judge. We have a whole kind of, family of all those inner beings. And actually, they can be helpful and unhelpful. So it's about understanding what's going on there and what's your relationship with those, and finding strategies in order to work with them. And how, we're never going to get rid of them. They're part of our survival mechanism as a human being. And they're there for a positive purpose, but they might not be showing up in a healthy way. Right? It's a bit like the part of you that wants to keep you smoking and the part of you that wants to give up. Well, you might have started smoking so that you could fit in, hang out with the cool kids, overcome your shyness. But now none of that's relevant anymore, but you're still doing the smoking. So it's like, how do you create a different dialogue with those parts of you in order to be more who you want to be now?
Yeah, a few things have popped to mind. I don't know if it's like that relevant, but it's just definitely like I feel things that if you're, like you say, trying to fit in or trying to be what you think you need to be in a certain position because other people have built this persona around this is what a whatever manager usually is or whatever. I think that like you stop being kind of you, and then obviously that's going to bring kind of confusion. So like just, the way I see it, I guess, and obviously like you always got work to do, but you've been hired for purpose, and it's because of like who you are, not because of this persona that people created that you have to fit into. And everyone's unique, and you've been hired because of, you're who you are, and you haven't got to fit into anyone's bucket as such or box. And also I was just going to say, like, about, just do, like you say, do stuff that makes you happy, not what you think you have to do, what other people are doing to make them happy, or what they think you should be doing to make you happy. Like, if it is like just go and playing video games for half an hour, go and do it. Don't worry about people judging you. Or if it's like just watching, a program that not everyone watches, but you enjoy it, then go and do it. Go and play with your kids or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. Life's too, like, in this realm, life's too short. And also, like, at the end of the day, I think people obviously, and it is hard, it is hard to feel like you want to be like, so obviously it's like a human trait, you wouldn't be human if you like didn't want to be like. But also at the end of the day, most people don't really care too much about what you're doing. At the end of the day, they might care for a little bit, and depending on who you are and what they are in relation to you. But generally, people are so busy in their own lives and what's going on around them that they're not like thinking about you as much as you probably think they are. And you should just take a step back and just relax and take every day's a gift, and you've got to make sure you take advantage of it. And it generally, like with the time thing, I used to be like so hung up on my to-do list. Like, I'll write out a to-do list and I'll like have to get this done. I'll stay up all night if I have to get this done. And I was like, at the end of the day, like when I look at things, I'm like, I haven't done it. I'm like, what is actually going to happen if that doesn't get done? Actually, probably most of the time, nothing in this world is going to make anything worse if I don't get that task done. And actually, my kid or something needs something that's far more important than me doing this task. And it reminded me of, I don't know how relevant it is, but I had a car crash recently and this lorry hit us. It was but every time to slow down, it was like weird. It was like an out of body experience, and it was just like time to slow down. And I managed to kind of get my bearings and somehow control the car. It was banged up, but that kind of just brought it all back to me. Like if that was like sped up and I was panically like doing stuff and moving around and, panicking, like I think things would have been a lot different potentially. So it wasn't kind of in my control, but because time kind of seemed like it could slow down, I could get things under control. And this kind of goes into what you're saying about just take time out, slow down, and you'll probably get better results, I think.
And are you okay from your car crash? Is everyone all right?
Yeah, it was okay. It's just the car was totally destroyed, so it took the brunt of it. But it was, it was an interesting event. So
the car's replaceable. So
yeah, exactly. And actually, I enjoyed not driving for a while, to be honest. So in terms of how can professionals use creativity to like differentiate themselves in a workplace where, well, obviously AI is going to automate a lot of routine tasks. I mean, it seems like being creative now is going to be more important than ever. So yeah, how can they do that?
Yeah, really interesting question. And I'm going to start by talking about what is creativity, because I feel like a lot of the time we talk about creativity in terms of the output, as in a great graphic designer or illustrator, sculptor, or a great actor or a great architect or whatever. And it's all about the thing that they produce that is, creative. And that is, there is truth in that. That's like professional creativity. But creativity, and there is a real issue with AI. I've got many friends who are illustrators and graphic designers who spent their whole lives really crafting their craft, designing characters, and AI can just scrape all of that in a moment. And obviously that's, that is not a good thing. But the creativity that I talk about with people is the everyday creativity, the innate human creativity that we all have, which is actually nothing to do with an output. It's actually to do it with a way of being. So it's about the ability to be curious. It's about the ability to be able to move forward with uncertainty. It's about being childlike or playful or
Open-minded, I guess.
open-minded, being okay with uncertainty, being able to get out of your comfort zone and take risks. And it's having a mindset, a creative mindset that does all of that. I call it the 7 C's of the creative mindset: curiosity, embracing tension and challenge, right? If everything's easy peasy, then probably not a lot of new, innovative, creative stuff's going to come out of it. The idea of being playful, so childlike, committed, like the creative process can be really hard sometimes. And it's like knowing that if I push through that, like you're saying, when you go for a walk and you can't work something out, and you shift it and change it and you sit with it in that kind of delicious chaos, as I call it, where it's there, but you can't quite grasp it, but you trust that it will come if you just sit with it, or you push it, or you go away and do something else and you come back to it. Sometimes that works too. Everyone's got their own different thing. But it's about being committed to it is important. So not giving up at the first hurdle, right? And pushing through. Being confident, having a sense of some confidence. So it being okay, it being safe to express yourself in that creative way. Being able to embrace the grey, right? So I find it very interesting in the world at the moment, the way in which the narrative of opinions goes at the moment. We're talking a lot about, well, if you're not with me, you have to be against me. It's sort of very binary. It's very black and white, right? And in a world where we're talking about, gender neutrality and it seems very weird to me that you'd have to be one or the other. Why can't you be somewhere in the middle? So for me, creativity is about being comfortable in the grey areas, which, nothing is black and white, or very little is black and white. Birth and death is probably about the only black and white things that there are. The idea of being uncomfortable to take risks and risking failure. And so much in business at the moment, we're so frightened of making a mistake because we don't have the time, money, you don't have the permission to do it. And if you can create an environment where it's okay for people to have this kind of mindset, then new, innovative, more human ways of doing things are going to emerge. But we need the right leadership, and we need the right culture, and you need the right processes around it in order to, to make that happen. So if we can think about the creativity as being our unique humanness, then AI will never have that. AI will only ever copy what has already gone before. Or will it? I don't know. Maybe it won't. Perhaps ChatGPT can give me the answer to that. But at the end of the day, I feel like the innate creativity of humans is the only thing that we have, and will become more important. I don't know in what way yet, but it has to do, for me, with being authentic and being able to take responsibility for yourself, share your own story, and be who you truly are in the world, rather than trying to pretend to be something that you're not, or that something you should be.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of people are saying that that's going to be the case. I think, like you say, because the environment that we live in, basically all around the world, I could see a lot of people in my life, like, being very tied down by, kind of, just tied down to those sort of not being able to get out of that sort of mindset that they kind of have to just kind of get on with things. They can't think outside the, let their creative juices flow, or be open-minded, or whatever. Or people are so bogged down with the day-to-day life. And like you say, the 24-hour news and the social media and everything like that, I think we're not creating an environment for that. So how would individuals that feel like they're stuck in that sort of loop and don't really have that sort of open-minded mindset and that kind of creativity mindset, that how can they get out of that loop, and how can companies kind of produce a workspace that can, like, make that flourish and bring that out of people?
Well, I think first of all, people have got to want it. They've got to want to do it. That's the number one thing. And I think some of those things that we talked about earlier on, about going from confusion to clarity, it's like getting back to the what's important to you, what really matters, understanding your strengths, that sort of stuff. And then if we think about how do you develop those different aspects of the creative mindset, how do I develop more curiosity? Well, as leaders, that means asking more questions perhaps and doing less telling. How can I be more comfortable in the grey? How can I give my team the opportunity to be more comfortable in the grey? Well, I have to create an environment where it's okay to get it wrong. And actually, the kind of success comes from what did we learn from getting it wrong, and what do we do next time so that we can innovate and evolve. So I think the biggest thing from a culture perspective, how can organizations create a culture for creativity, is trust. So it's the piece around trusting people to be grown up and do what they say they're going to do, and then trusting people to get on with it in the way that works for them, and trusting yourself and trusting the creative process. So, and the more that you can, if you're in a leadership position, the more that you as a leader can trust yourself, can bring your creative self to things, the more you will encourage everyone else to do the same. Because the more you can be as a leader, the more permission you give to everyone else to be themselves as well, of course. So actually, it's about standing back and letting people take charge of the thing that they're doing in the way that they want to do it. And that doesn't mean, that setting direction or being really clear about the principles and the guidelines around something aren't important. They are. And if you can get everybody signed up to that's the way we're going to work together, this is the goal that we're going after, this is the vision or the purpose that we're following, and then you've given people a kind of a framework and let them play in that, because they're aware of the principles and the guardrails around that, then they've got the freedom within that to be autonomous and to do the work that they want to do in the way that they want to do it. So I was saying, obviously, there's good failing and there's bad failing. If we can continue to keep failing because of a lack of competence or care, that's not great. But actually, if you're failing in order to fail forward, that's a good thing, because you fail. That means you've pushed the boundaries as far as you can and you've not quite managed it. Then what do you learn? Regroup, go again, push it even further.
Yeah. And I think we're all going to have our own natural biases. Like, it's built into us. We can't get rid of it. But I think it's very important, especially in today's kind of echo chamber environment we live in, that you do try and keep open-minded and try and look at it from all angles. You keep that from the neutral point of view and from both sides, because things are only going to get worse, in the world that we live in. So I think it's very important, as a mindset, if you go down one avenue too much, that could be a really damaging thing to you personally, in my opinion. And like you say, failure, embrace it. I mean, I hate failure. I'm very competitive, but I failed a lot. And actually, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean too much. Someone has to win, someone has to get the job. It doesn't mean that you're terrible. It just means they've said something, done something slightly different that maybe someone liked. And everyone's so different, it doesn't mean that it's the right decision anyway. It just means that was the decision that was made. It probably helps that I support a rubbish football team, but when you keep losing, you kind of just get used to it, and you kind of embrace when it does happen, that you embrace the wins more, so I think, it's hard. It's easier said than done. And I think times are going to get tough, which we'll get into now. Because, it is the job market, as I discussed with James in my recent chat, is tough. A lot of people are being laid off for various reasons, including the economies and AI, and the competition then increases because the amount of job people are going for, there's less of them, and people are going to be set back a lot. And if you're not, like I said before, you're worrying about if you are the next one to go. And then there's younger people who are finding it hard to get jobs because those sort of junior level roles are just getting less and less out there, so there's less opportunity for them. So how do you kind of regain any form of confidence if you're in a bit of a slump or you keep getting setbacks, and it's hard, it does zap your energy, how do you regain that?
This is a really big question, isn't it? This is a really big question. But if, for example, you are being made redundant, that's a really difficult time because you're not in control of it. It's being done to you, and you're grieving for what you once had, and and the people you work with, or especially if it was a job you liked. If it's about finding a job and not being able to get onto the career ladder, it's really hard. It is really hard. And the only thing I can bring to that conversation really is it's about reframing it to find new perspectives on it. So, and both of those examples need different things, I think. So, if you're being made redundant, it can feel like the worst moment in your life. But actually, quite often we can look back through our lives and realize that the worst when something bad happened, a door opened to something new. And so actually, you're not in control of what's happening to you, but the only thing you are in control of is how you approach it and how you might choose to reframe it, and doing some of the stuff that we talked about at the beginning by kind of really getting back in touch with what you need, what you enjoy, who you are, what your strengths are, and how you're valued outside of your job or in the job you were in, as well as the rest of your life. We are not our jobs. We are whole human beings with relationships and things that we do outside of work as well. And sometimes work can become a little bit of an eclipse for everything else in our lives, and we make it the most important thing out of everything. Obviously, it's important because we need to pay mortgages, we need to keep life going. But actually, sometimes it's helpful to de-importantize, which isn't a word, but I just made it up. And make other areas of your life more important. And it's that stuff that's going to enrich you whilst you're going through that process. So how do you lean into other things being more important? And this is, again, we're listening to the energy of something. What fills your cup? What makes you feel alive? Is it that tennis that you play on a Saturday that you absolutely love? Do you want to go and do it more times a week, in order to help you move through that process? It's like, do the stuff that brings you joy. Be with people that bring you joy. Find new things to learn. Think about it potentially as a learning phase. So it's a little bit about reframing it from a negative into, I can't do anything about this, but what I'm in control of is what opportunities does it open up for me? Small ones. And yes, they'll be going through a process of grieving and, bitterness, anger, all those things. That's a natural part of a change process. But start to think about how you support yourself with some of those other things, which can shift your perspective into what opportunities. Where's the good? Where might be the good in this? However tiny, even if it's I no longer have to get the 6:30 a.m. train or the 6:36 that I used to get. I don't have to do that anymore. I can sleep until 7:30 if I want. Right? What are those tiny little things? What is there to be grateful for? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
And be kind to yourself. It's shitty. It's hard. And some days it will be awful, but then it's like, go again the next day. It's a bit like falling off the wagon with a diet, isn't it? It's like, don't go, I'm never doing it again. Just go, okay, I'm just going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to try again. I think if you're on the other end of things and you're trying to get into the workplace and it's not happening for you, again, it's coming back to, what do you have to offer? What is that thing that you can offer that no one else can? And how do you protect yourself from those repeated rejections where you're not getting it? Something I've definitely learned being an entrepreneur for the last 3 years, running my own business, the amount of rejection or tumbleweed that you have to deal with means that it can be very difficult sometimes. You think you're putting all this effort in and nobody cares and nobody's listening, nobody's watching, nobody's getting in contact. But it's having that ability to be able to just get up again and do it the next day. And if you look at what people talk about, anybody who's been successful, is that the people that are successful are the ones that keep going and keep trying. And then what you have to do is say, well, what do I need to do around that to protect myself so that when I do get up the next day and have another go, I feel energized and refreshed and optimistic, as opposed to cynical, depressed, and giving off a bad energy, which won't help you in your cause either. So it's how do I maintain that positivity? So maybe it is about being very boundaried about it. I'm only going to job search for 2 hours a day. Then I'm going to go off and do this stuff that I love, so that when I come back to that job search tomorrow and I get another load of rejections, I can just go, I'm going to go again. And then my final point on that would also be is, how do you reframe rejection? When I think about rejection, I always think about Edison, that invented the light bulb. And I can't remember the exact statistics of it, but he used to say that every time I fail at it, I'm one step closer to the answer, one step closer to success. So I just need to keep failing enough times, and eventually I'll get there. And I sort of remember that when I feel like, God, I've got to do this again. I've got to go again. And no one's interested. No one's listening. No one's kind of picking the phone up to work with me. But, and it's right. I've kept going and I keep going. And here I am. And so that's the thing. It's just keep going, but protect yourself around that. Does that answer your question? Or was that helpful in any way?
Yeah, I was just trying to find a quote, because you kind of reminded me of something. Oh yeah, that's it. Wayne Gretzky, a famous ice hockey player, he said, like, you miss 100% of shots that you don't take, along those lines. So, like you say, you don't try, and you're not going to succeed. So you just, like you say, you're going to shoot the puck in ice hockey, you're going to miss a lot of times. Well, 1 or 2 times it's going to hit the back of the net and you're going to be the hero. I kind of, it's hard. Look, it's taken me, like, I'm nearly 40 now, so it's taken me a while, but I think I just kind of like go into this mindset of, like, I believe in myself, and okay, yeah, if I fail, not so much like it's all their fault, but just like, like I said earlier, it's just their decision. Doesn't mean I'm not any worse than what I think I am. It's just a decision had to be made, and then we get on with it and go to the next one. And I think, I think sometimes it's okay to be like selfish a bit. Like, you do have to take time for yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, there's no way you can take care of anything else going on in your life.
Absolutely.
Your kids or your family or friends or whatever. So there's no point, like, always just putting other people first or your job first, and then just not caring about yourself. So, selfish has a very, like, bad, reputation, that word, but actually it is, like, okay sometimes, in my opinion. And
I
it's
agree.
funny. And it's funny, like what you said about, the job is like, and I guess I've been guilty of this, like, a lot. When people ask about you, and your first thing you say is, I'm whatever, and my job is blah, blah, blah. Like, not that I've got 2 children and, that kind of thing. I'm a father of 2, which I'm a lot more prouder of, and it brings me a lot more joy. I mean, I love my job, don't get me wrong, but the kids are like, so it's like, yeah, it's funny how you kind of put that forward as like the main thing all the time. And I guess to finish off, because I know you're busy and I'll let you go after this, but obviously you work with, like, companies to try and install this sort of framework. And what are the kind of, just finish off, kind of the main things you see that potentially are wrong, and how do you generally put them right? Obviously, I know it'll vary quite a lot, but.
Well, that's another big question, Sean. I feel like I see a lot. Nobody sets out to be a bad leader or have a negative impact on people. But I do see, this is why I find what I do helpful for people, because, and especially for emerging leaders, because it sets them off in the right way. But what I see is we do have a lot of leaders that are a bit like driving around in cars without having taken a driving test, and start crashing into people and, creating lots of problems, right? And so we wouldn't do that with a car. So why do we do that with leadership? And the starting point for leadership is that self-awareness, is what impact am I having? And self-awareness is a bit of a double-edged sword, because if you become self-aware without the support and compassion around yourself, you can end up kind of being so self-aware you freeze yourself because you're frightened of doing anything wrong, right? So you have to kind of bring the compassion and the confidence with it as well. But that's something that I see is there's a lot of people who have not yet stepped into the self-awareness to really think about the intentions for why they're doing things in the way that they're doing. They may be just copying other stuff that they've seen. And then the other thing I think is just a lot of fear of getting things wrong. And actually, when they have permission to lead in the way that they want to lead and that feels right for them, they can have a much better impact. So it's also about working with people to realize that it's defining your own leadership identity. Now, with my co-creative leadership model, I have a kind of, set of principles and a framework for that. But they're kind of starting points or foundations. And within that, you be your own kind of leader. And one of those things is about having a positive impact. Sometimes we can get a little bit wrapped up in ourselves. And if I always used to say to myself, if I'm not having a positive impact in this context, then what am I doing here? Why am I here? So if I'm leading and I'm not having a positive impact, then it's time to reframe that or step away from it and do it in a different way so that I can create a positive impact. Otherwise, what's the point? If you're just having a negative impact, people become unhappy and then they leave. I suppose the other thing that I want to kind of bring up about that is often we can feel like we can't change anything. When you think about the world as being a bit of a depressing place at the moment, and I feel like we're all affected by it without feeling like we have any control over what's going on. But at the end of the day, the only thing we can change is ourselves. And if we can change ourselves, and we can change ourselves in a day-to-day environment and people that we interact with, that will change the world one person at a time, because we'll be having our own personal impact. And I feel like that same thing happens in business. You get a lot of people who feel really disillusioned because inside the business, they don't feel they can do anything. Whereas actually, if they work on being who they want to be and show up intentionally and lead and work with people in the way that feels authentic and has integrity for themselves, that will create a change, maybe not in the way they're thinking. So that's what I tend to do. I tend to work with people. We're all individuals. We might be in teams, we might be in organizations, and that's important as well. But we also, as individuals, by changing the way we show up, will change the way other people show up. And then there's within that, there's also, it's like the serenity prayer, isn't it? God grant me the wisdom to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. It's a little bit like, what can I control? What can I influence? And what do I have to accept? And this is again with people thinking about, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right work? If what you need to be able to accept is unacceptable, then that tells you it might be time to go somewhere else or do something different. But actually, if you can get to a place of acceptance, it's like accepting those things in ourselves, which, may be less than perfect or that we might not like very much, but accepting them because we are imperfect humans. The same is true of the systems and the organizations that we're in as well. So are there things we can accept? And if we can, then what is it I can focus my time on controlling and influencing? There's no point in trying to worrying about and trying to influence those things which I'd have no influence or control over. And I think that's where we waste a lot of time, is worrying about the stuff that we can't do anything about. Whereas actually, if we come back to ourselves and think about, how do I show up in this moment? How do I show up in this meeting? How can I support people in the group that I'm working with? That will have more of an impact.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, it all comes down to is like, you can only really impact, like you say, yourself and how you project yourself outwards and your inner thoughts and stuff. And obviously, it can be hard to control, and the world doesn't help in the current climate. But yeah, I would just say, and I'm no expert, that's for sure. And I've got a lot of work to do myself, but I do think like, take that time for yourself, be selfish towards yourself sometimes, and then
it's about taking care of yourself, isn't it?
Yeah. And then you'll soon realize what really matters to you, what really you enjoy, and just do that. I know it can be difficult at times, and it's not easy, and people in some really tricky situations, but that's like you say, just find that like little thing that gives you joy, if it's a walk or if it's playing a sport or if it's watching a certain show. Like, just put that to-do list to the side for a bit and just take that time out and just focus on that. And I know I'm guilty of it, as people probably know who know me, but it does help. But yeah, just like, thank you, Ursula, for your time today. And, is there anything coming up in your world that people should know about? Or obviously I put the link to your website in the description so people can check out your services and stuff. But yeah, is there anything else coming up for your world?
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for a great conversation. It's been really interesting, and I feel like I've really, really racked my brains today to answer your brilliant, sometimes large questions. So I feel like I could go on for hours, to be honest. So what's coming up in my world? If anybody is interested in finding out more than about what I do, please feel free to reach out, and you can book a discovery call, and we can explore, a bit like you and me did, explore how we might collaborate or work together. And also coming up for me is I am just starting my own podcast as well, called The Big Life Pivot. And it's kind of about stories from the other side of people who've made a big change in their life. And it doesn't have to be big, doesn't need to mean something so transformative, but big to them, whatever big means to them, something significant. And I talk to and work with a lot of people who a lot of stuff is holding them back from getting where they want to go. And so I thought it would be helpful to share with people stories from people who are on the other side of that big pivot, that big change, and what they've learned and what wisdom they have to offer. So yeah, I'm going to be starting that. So if you know anybody, or you are someone who's pivoted in your life and you'd like to come and have a conversation, I would love to hear from you.
That sounds awesome. And yeah, we'll definitely be sharing that on the channel when it's out. And yeah, I think that's really important to hear in these times. So yeah, thanks again, Ursula.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks so much. Yeah, cheers. Thank you.